Yonda pravicya mama vachamimam prasuptam sanjeevayadi akhila shaktidhara sudhamna anyamscha hastacharana sravanattvagadin pranan namo bhagavate purushaya tubhyam. So yesterday we had a very interesting series of discussions on mindfulness. As I mentioned yesterday, mindfulness is not something that we learn, a new skill or new discovery. In a way, it is a way of reconnecting with our own true nature. At the highest level, mindfulness brings happiness, wisdom, virtue, eventually leading to nirvana, what Buddhists call the liberation from the cycle of birth, life, then going through the same game of happiness and unhappiness, dying, and again reborn, this continuing cycle. To get out of this cycle is the purpose of the teachings of Buddhism. Now, one important point to remember is, as I mentioned yesterday, there is an ascent to reach this level of mindfulness. From where we stand now to where we have to reach. As yesterday I mentioned, it's an intellectual understanding of the impermanence of what we experience is not enough. Everyone knows some of the fundamental vital truths, which if you really remember all the time, are enough to make our life happy all the time. But it doesn't happen. When we try to actually practice, bring to our own experience level, mental level, what we intellectually know, suddenly there is an invisible mental block, a conflict between what we want to do and what our mind at present allows us to do. So how to resolve this conflict? How to bridge the gap? For that, Buddha devised a unique method. That is, yesterday I briefly mentioned, but today I'm going to discuss in details, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path. The Four Noble Truths include right understanding, positive intention, proper speech, proper action, proper livelihood, effort, of course samyak smriti, mindfulness, and also proper concentration, meditation. And now in the Pali language, even sammak is used, in Sanskrit samyak is used. Now the word samyak in Sanskrit, it has got a special significance. It means comprehensive, natural, reaching spontaneous. Suppose we know certain things and we want to apply that knowledge every moment, every micro moment in our action, then we are not established in that knowledge. When we want to make use of something, what we make use of is not a natural part of our structure. When that wisdom becomes a natural part of a structure, then it becomes samyak. Let, for example, the samyak drishti, the right vision, the right perception, the right understanding. That is the first, chronologically. Samyak drishti. Now, samyak drishti has got two levels. First, we try to practice. Second, we get naturally, spontaneously get established in that. When we get established in that proper understanding, let us say, or when we get fully established in samyak walk, proper speech, another another discipline, the second in chronological order of the Eight Noble Paths. Samyak walk, proper speech. Now, when we get established in proper speech, we naturally evolve a mind which will not permit us to speak in an improper manner, to do harm to somebody in a way that hurts somebody. It becomes psychologically impossible for us to do something wrong that could be harmful to others or to ourselves. So that being fully established in that awareness is the state of mindfulness. So it has got two stages. First, the stage for the practitioner, and the natural state of someone who has reached. So Tathagata, and in the Mahayana Buddhism, it is called Tathagata Garbha. Literally means the womb of Tathagata. The one who has already reached that goal. This Buddha nature is already inherent in all of us. Just as a statue of Buddha is inherent in a granite stone. A sculpture removes, chisels out all unnecessary parts and get a Buddha. So also, let's say a piece of gold, a jewelry, maybe an expert jeweler, or maybe a person who makes ornaments. He removes all unnecessary parts according to a plan, and you get a ring, a golden ring. So it is already inherent there. So that inherent Buddha nature becomes natural to us when we get fully established in mindfulness. When this happens, when we actually start practicing these Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path, what happens is there is a gradual evolution, a sublimation and an elevation, a purification of our own inherent nature, our own ego. Yesterday somebody was mentioning ego. What happens, ego needs a refinement. That's all it needs. Even ego gets fully refined, it is not what we normally understand by the word ego, E-G-O in English word. What it means, what it becomes is something totally different. So that ego becomes a universal ego. That's why this universality is one of the fundamental unique features of Buddha's teachings. So you should remember, Buddha was not the founder of a cult. Many of these teachings could be found in all traditions, in fact. For Four Noble Truths, for example, when you feel dissatisfied with these fleeting momentary things, when you start looking for something else, something higher, that's a time when you become convinced of the impermanence, the anicca, what Pali canonical literature calls it, the anitya or the impermanent nature of all the fleeting phenomena. In fact, that is the beginning of all noble sentiments, all noble achievements in human civilization, Unless you have something higher to think of, you won't become a musician. You will be having a full square meal 3 times, 4 times every day, going to gymnasium and having a good time. Well, that is fine. But when you evolve further, you find, these muscles or the money or the home and all these things, well, they are good, they are necessary, but they are not permanent. So when you realize the impermanence, then you naturally start looking for something higher. And this is what yesterday I mentioned, parinama dukkha. Parinama dukkha, parinama means change, transformation, something that brings about a change in your life. So the essence of incompleteness, that actually brings about a change in our perspective. That's what happened to Buddha, as I mentioned yesterday. When he saw the dead body being taken to the cremation ground, and before that he saw a sick man, old man, and then he found, well, these things are terrible things in life. They are totally inescapable, unavoidable things. So that real understanding of the inescapability and consequent dissatisfaction and understanding of the impermanence, that naturally prompts you to look for something higher. And then you come to the Eightfold Noble Path. So I shall give a brief description of the Four Noble Truths, and then I shall try to deal more elaborately the Eightfold Path. So as I mentioned, this is the path of the ascent from a normal human life perspective to higher spiritual life. So the first noble truth is the understanding, the ability to recognize dukkha. That doesn't come for everyone, you know. Many people are happy with the dukkha. The point is, when you are not aware of dukkha, then only you are actually in misery. When you perceive the impermanence of these phenomenal life experiences, then actually the door is open for you to get out of it. So the fundamental understanding, the first discipline is the realization of the impermanence, the dissatisfaction, the incompleteness, the imperfection of all the things that we normally value as the most precious things in life. You find different shades of this recognition among great men, great artists, great musicians, great poets, great classical writers. So some of them became great because some experiences actually made them focus their whole attention on music or art or literature. Not that everyone becomes a Buddha, but you find behind every noble endeavor, accomplishments, there is either conscious or unconscious realization of the impermanence of everyday life experiences. And so that is one mark of nobility of a human being. So that is the first noble truth, is the proper understanding of the reality of impermanence, and then the ability to recognize that impermanence as a mark of imperfection or incompleteness. The second noble truth is the truth with the cause of suffering. So this suffering depends upon our inability to understand the impermanent as the impermanent, or our tendency to expect perfection from what is essentially imperfect, or our natural tendency to expect permanence from things which are essentially inherently impermanent. So let us say Buddha was walking through the streets of Lumbini and he saw a sick man. The sick man was miserable, perhaps. He saw misery on his face. If the sick man had the wisdom to understand that sickness is a natural, an inherent, inescapable aspect of human life and human body, and death is totally inescapable. Once this imperfection is recognized, then you will not be unhappy when your near and dear ones passes away, but the point is, it won't shatter you beyond limits. You recognize the problem, but you also recognize the inescapable nature, the unavoidability of a phenomenon called death. That's what happens. So once you come in terms with this, then the problem is a lesser problem. A problem is a big problem so long as we don't recognize it in its proper perspective. Once you recognize a problem of a problem, it is not a problem. I often give the example. Suppose you are driving and you find that there is a possibility of 10 minutes delay on the road, and you come to know of that. So when you reach that point, you are relaxed. You know that there is no way jumping, there is no way getting anxious. So you are able to handle that problem. So once you know how to handle the problem, once you recognize the problem is not a problem. So once you recognize that you are not going to have the same job for 50, 60 years, then you won't be shattered when you lose one job and when you are in a predicament to look for another job. So the inevitability, the inescapability, or the essential impermanence of all these will give us a spiritual wisdom which will help us to slowly evolve to mindfulness. As I mentioned yesterday, mindfulness is a natural state of awareness of certain fundamental principles of existence of which we are fully intellectually aware, but frequently we forget. It's not that there is a dearth of intellectual knowledge or information. Everyone knows that death is inevitable. Human body is bound to fall sick. Otherwise, what will body do? Suppose we live 1,000 years, so body is bound to fall sick. So we recognize that fact and go for treatment. Not that we be. That's why sloth is one of the hindrances. In the dhamma category, kaya, that is body, vedana, sensations or feelings, chitta, mind, and dhamma. These are the four foundations of mindfulness. Satipatthana, according to Mahasatipatthana Sutta. So sati is smriti. Smriti is awareness. So you should be mindful, you should be aware of the true nature of body and all its functions, as I mentioned yesterday, walking, eating, fooding, and also eating food, and also the sensations going on in the mind. You should become aware of it, but be detached from it. And also we should be aware of the aggregates of the mental system, the different sensations of the mental system, and the hindrances and obstacles, all these we should be aware of it. When we are aware of it, then nothing can shake us. So the cause is that we do not recognize the impermanent as the impermanent. We mistake the impermanent as the permanent. So we think that life should be always happy. Buddha doesn't deny our right to be happy. But Buddha prescribes a different medicine. You should stop looking for perpetual happiness. Then you'll be happy all the time. So once you stop looking for perpetual happiness, then unhappiness is not unhappiness. So we are always happy all the time. So going beyond happiness and unhappiness. In fact, this all you find a Gita. Gita says, Sukham Chatyandikam yet buddhigrahyam atindriyam. In Gita, in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, Atyandikam Sukham means the absolute, fundamental, essential happiness. It is something that goes beyond happiness and unhappiness as we understand at the empirical level. So, in fact, that's why nirvana, one of the essential features of nirvana is happiness. But that happiness is not actually what we understand by happiness. At the empirical level, happiness only implies temporary absence of unhappiness. For some time we are not unhappy, and that's what we normally interpret as happiness. But the real happiness goes beyond happiness and happiness equation. So these sufferings have got certain reasons, certain conditions. Now, in that respect, Buddha gives a very, very interesting explanation as to the cause of suffering going beyond the present life. So it is a very interesting thing, According to Buddhist psychology, there is no future, there is no past. because that's the purpose of mindfulness, to remain in that state. The past we experienced only in the form of present. The future we are going to experience only when it takes the form of the present. So actually, the line of demarcation between the past and the present and future is only an imaginary line of demarcation. This is the highest state of experience. But then, in coming at the level of analysis, Buddha teaches us how to reach this level. Let us see the past. So, according to him, the past life, the present life is the effect of past life, and the future is the effect of the present. So if we can take care of the present, then we can escape the burden of the past, and we can also avoid the burden of the future. So it is called Praditya Samutpada, dependent origination, which he explained as a 12-link chain. That is avidya, samskara, vijnana, nama, rupa, sadyadana, sparsha, vedana, trishna, upadana, bhava, jati, jara, marana. So all these things. In future, we may have to suffer death and rebirth. At the present, we go through this initial consciousness, mind, body, sensations, mind, and so on. And in the past, we already have done certain actions. So these actions produce certain results, and these results together constitute our character. And these impressions are already stored up in the mental system, which with the Buddhist commentators of yoga philosophy calls, karmasaya. Karmasaya is a repository. It's like a lake under the lower level layers of the lake. All these samskaras, impressions, memories, tendencies, attitudes, and emotions are all stored up. They are all coming from previous actions. So when we do something at the conscious level, that action is over for the time being, but that action leaves its residue in our own mental system. Somebody could ask this question. A person dies, and all the tools with which he acted, he lived in this world, also disappear when the person's body disappears. So how can tendencies remain intact? The point is, we may do certain things with our hand, with our eyes, with our different senses of perception, different senses of action. But the subtle remnants of these actions will remain accumulated in the mental system called chittam. And when we are born again, when we go through certain experiences, these memories and impressions, samskaras, they come to the surface and they reconnect. Let us say, for example, somebody who had done a lot of meditation in previous life, not in past life, but maybe several life cycles earlier. And if that person reads in a newspaper, or maybe in a magazine, or maybe walks in front of a place where meditation is going on, and he will have a natural tendency, because he had meditated maybe 2000 years back in another life cycle. So that if that impression is strong enough, if it had registered a very strong, powerful memory, samskara, that samskara will prompt this person, and immediately, let me get into it. And if the samskara is strong enough, that he may feel at home when the meditation is going on. If the samskaras are not strong enough, or he may feel terribly repulsed, or the terrible thing, some meditation, absolutely useless, and he'll go away, and may go to movie perhaps. So, actually, we are repeating what we have been doing earlier. So in that case, where is past? The past is being replayed in the present. And the present, we are actually laying the foundation for the future. So the entire phenomena is perceived to be a continuous flow of momentary, in the sense, impermanent, fleeting, changing experiences. And once you are able to see them as you watch a drama sitting in the gallery, then you may go through all this, but you are not shocked. This brings a kind of a peculiar spiritual common sense. That's why we don't get quickly trapped and identified or associated with some momentary happy, unhappy experiences. Not that we will react, we may solve the problems, but it will not shatter our mind. It will not have a devastating impact on our mental system. The third noble truth is that it is possible that this suffering, this impermanence, this problem can be resolved. Once you get out of this trap, the fundamental trap, that is Trishna, desire to have more and more of these experiences, so that we will not be born again to enjoy or suffer. What happens, then the cause is over. The Trishna or desire, that is very important. Once our mind get obsessed with a desire, then it's very difficult for us to somehow escape, in any way escape an experience related to that desire. See, if you are going through, if you are walking the street, a child looking at a candy shop, and he wants to ask his mother to buy the candy, and mother perhaps has not enough time, the child may dream of eating that candy at night. So this happens to everyone, this happens. So we actually accumulate impressions and samskaras in waking state, and then we relive, re-experience those samskaras at the mental level. In dream, this is what happens. Like that, samskaras, impressions coming from previous life actions are again and again replayed in our mental system. Once Trishna is gone, desire is gone, then what happens? There is nothing for us. Then naturally we are ready to practice the Eightfold Noble Truth. That is the Eightfold Path to liberation. Once we get established in the Third Noble Truth, that is the conviction and the understanding that this impermanence, this dukkha, this incompleteness or dissatisfaction can be removed, can disappear, and there is a way to make this grief disappear, then we naturally graduate to this stage of practicing that is the Fourth Noble Truth, that is the path, the Eightfold Disciplines path to liberation. Okay, now another very important point to remember is, and this is a very important thing, this has something to do with the Buddhist epistemology and metaphysics, which not directly related to mindfulness, but we'll understand the real meaning of this Eightfold Path. You find here Samyak Drishti, let's say right view, right perception. It's related to wisdom. Then you find Samyak Sankalpa, Samyak walk, Samyak conduct, proper work, proper way of behaving, proper livelihood, which is called Samyak Ajiva, proper resolve, Samyak Sankalpa, proper understanding. All this you find. Now what's the meaning of proper? What's the meaning of Samyak? So it is explained by Buddhist dialecticians. One of the greatest dialecticians in Buddhist tradition after Nagarjuna was Dignaga, who was a prominent figure in the Yogacara Buddhism. It is called Vijnanavada Buddhism. It's part of Mahayana tradition. So according to these dialecticians, there is one interesting principle. It's called Apohavada. What it means is simple. It's called Anya Apoha. Well, the meaning is, they say, suppose this is a blue flower. It only means that it only implies the exclusion of all other flowers other than blue flower. So when you use the word proper conduct, what it means is, you cannot really point out what is proper conduct. What it implies is, it implies the exclusion of all improper conduct. So samyak drishti, proper understanding, proper vision, proper perception, proper perspective, so to speak. It's very difficult to say. In different traditions, there are different views. But Buddha gave certain way of looking at life and things that brings us happiness, that brings no harm to others, that stabilizes the equilibrium, and that is good for the whole humanity, that promotes compassion, that promotes peace, virtue. All these factors are involved when Buddha used the word samyak in Sanskrit, sammak in Pali. So this is a very comprehensive philosophical view that it is called anyway. So that is related to subjective idealism, Yogacara, but that is often used to explain the comprehensiveness of the implication of the word right conduct, right ajiva, right walk, proper word, proper speech, proper livelihood, proper action. What may be proper? You should exclude all that is improper, all that is not samyak, all that doesn't promote compassion, happiness, virtue, universal goodness. The universality, that is one unique feature of this eightfold noble path. So the first one is, so I shall just try to explain this gradually. The first one is samyak drishti. So it means all wrong perceptions, samyak perception, samyak understanding means all wrong perception should be excluded. All mithya drishti, all wrong views should be excluded. We should have a comprehensive view of life and experiences, which again naturally comes to a person who is convinced of the reality of impermanence of everything. All wrong views are rooted in this wrong understanding. We believe that this world is eternal. When I am unhappy, I think the causes that make me unhappy are everlasting. I may know intellectually they are not everlasting. A person who has lost his job, he knows intellectually and he is struggling, he is applying for new job. Still, the fact that loss of job is part of the phenomenon, the game of human life, because a job is essentially impermanent, that doesn't come down to his emotional level. It is there as a conviction. When it comes down to emotional level, it becomes samyak. So it becomes spontaneous, natural. So then we become wise. So the first discipline is samyak drishti, which again actually related to the fundamental spiritual wisdom. The second one is samyak sankalpa, the right way of determining, decision making, the right way of taking the right decision, not having any ill will, hostility towards others, and to renounce attachment to the fleeting phenomenal world. Attachment, see, the word attachment is again a big tricky one. What it means is obsessive attachment that makes us miserable. That's the meaning of attachment here. So it should be understood very clearly. What it means is, we know these things are impermanent, but still we cannot get out of our obsessive bondage to that, in spite of our desire to come out of that. So when that is gone, then we get established in Samyak Sankalpa. And a person who is established in mindfulness, this becomes natural. That is one unique feature. It is not something that is to be attained. It is something that we are fully established in. That's what happens when we become established in mindfulness. Sati means smriti, awareness. We become aware of the fundamental, essential impermanence, and therefore the incompleteness and the dissatisfactory nature of all these things. Then we can have peaceful coexistence with the problems of the world, even while trying to solve the problems. That's an important. This awareness takes away that problem of misery, pain, unhappiness. Not that we become insensitive or inactive or negligent. We don't try to solve the problems. We do try to solve the problems, but there is no misery in it. The third discipline is Samyak walk. Proper speech means exclusion of all improper word, improper way of talking, conversation. That somehow again disturbs the equilibrium, that disturbs the compassion, human understanding, humanity. That's what is meant by Samyak walk. So even the tendency to speak a wrong word is removed. And so that is a true implication of Samyak, or in English translation, the right. Why it's called right? Capital letter R is used frequently in translations. That means it has got a special significance. Even the tendency to speak a wrong word or to have a wrong resolve or the wrong perception, that tendency is completely eradicated. What happens, a new mind emerges. A mind which is different from the mind that is devoid of these practices, understanding. Then the fourth one is right conduct, Samyak Kamma or Samyak Karma, means action, conduct. It's based on Panchashila, the 5 disciplines. Basically, even they all constitute certain fundamental ethical, moral principles of everyday moments, everyday activities, everyday interactions with others. Again, it is not a deliberate skill or an efficiency or a capacity that we develop, which become naturally established in that. So it becomes inherently impossible, psychologically impossible for such a person to speak a wrong word that harms others, to take a wrong resolve, or to do certain things. So even the mind, even a tendency to do certain things, certain wrong things, is completely eradicated. That's why I mentioned earlier the word Samyak or Sammak in Pali, that is English translation, the right word, right conduct, right action, etc. It implies in a very comprehensive manner even that natural tendency of human mind to do the wrong thing, to speak in the wrong way is eradicated. So then the right livelihood. Again, these are all universal ethical principles. In a way, all these naturally become our characteristics once we get established the first fundamental ethical spiritual teaching of Four Noble Truths, impermanence. Behind every kind of desire, there is a hidden feeling that is going to be there all the time. Greed, a greedy person struggling to make money, he may know intellectually that money is not going to last long, and money is not going to make him happy, money is not necessarily going to make him virtuous, but still there is a feeling that wealth or the possession of wealth will give him something which is permanent. So once a person gets established in the principle of impermanence of all these things, then all these tendencies naturally disappear. Then right effort, sammik vyayama, constant endeavor to remove wrong thoughts, wrong ideas from the mind. That is sincere effort with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. When we practice these disciplines with a sense of sanctity and sacredness, then naturally even the effort to practice these disciplines will help us. The seventh one is sammik smriti, which is actually what we were talking about yesterday. That is sati. Sati is a Pali equivalent of smriti. Smriti means, in Sanskrit it's called smriti, memory, awareness, etc. So when we get established in all these virtues, there's another word is the metta in Pali, which is metta in modern English we use, metta, which is called metta, means good feeling, compassion, good understanding, friendliness, humanism, all these qualities together become natural to us. And they become the properties of our own mind. So, sammik smriti. And the last one is sammik samadhi, the proper concentration. Now, these are some of the disciplines that Buddha mentioned. Yesterday I mentioned this earlier, that in spite of all these, one may find it difficult to practice any of these disciplines. Even a person who just at the primary level, a beginner, can start his spiritual life towards this state by doing good action. So sammik karma and sammik ajiva and sammik vyayama, these three are related to a beginner. Sammik ajiva means proper livelihood. Sammik karma means proper action. And sammik vyayama means proper effort. So some noble work, noble engagement at the physical level can slowly bring about a proper perspective. Because as I mentioned, physical actions produce spiritual energy. And at the level of physical action, we have a lot of freedom. We don't have much freedom as to what thought is going to emerge in our mind next moment. But we have a lot of freedom. Well, I will certainly do certain good things with my hand, with my body, when I can. At the physical level, any noble activity, even with a selfish motive, will be a good beginning for the beginner. Because at the beginning itself, we may not be able to practice unselfishness in action. It's not possible. But it's always better to begin with some noble activity, even with a selfish motive. So I often, people ask this question, I won't do anything unless I'm able to do things without any selfish motive. Well, I often give the story, a father asked his son, please bring me a glass of water. He was thirsty. The son told him, no, I won't bring you a glass of water, because if I bring a glass of water, I'm bringing without a selfish motive. I have brought you a glass of water, so I won't bring you a glass of water. So it's just like a child saying, well, I won't go to kindergarten. I shall go to Harvard or no education. It's not possible. You cannot begin your education at Harvard or Oxford. You have to begin your kindergarten next door to us. Maybe you have to begin your home when you are 2 years old. So there is a beginning for everyone. This often, people, especially you have to be careful about ego. We often go, I want to be completely free from ego. It's not possible. It's just like a child, a 2-year-old child saying, I won't go to kindergarten, I want a PhD. Not going to happen. He has to go to kindergarten, work hard, get a good grade, then go to primary school, then go to city college, maybe university later. So first we must give a promotion, a sublimation to our ego. The ego should be given some good job, some good work to do. And even with a selfish motive, if we can do some good actions, that is a great thing. Because these selfish good actions, noble actions, will generate some good healthy samskaras, which will slowly help us to graduate to the next level. And at that level, we'll be able to do things without selfish motive. Just as you from kindergarten, you go to city college or maybe school or somewhere like that. And then only we'll be slowly able to develop these qualities. That's why the Samyak has got a lot of comprehensive meaning. At the highest, most highly evolved level, it becomes spontaneous. It becomes impossible for us to do anything wrong, to speak in a harmful manner to anyone, to avoid concentrating on the impairments of things. It becomes natural to us at the highest level. But at the beginning, it is a discipline we have to practice. We may require some effort. So, and then we will be able to connect ourselves with our own true nature, the real mind. So then what happens is we are able to watch our own life, our own emotions, our own feelings, our own anger, our own depression, our own anxiety. So that when anxiety is observed, well, I'm getting too much anxious. It is possible only when you have a conviction, well, it's not necessary to be unnecessarily anxious. That's why you become aware of you are getting too anxious. We are able to recognize our mind becoming angry when there is a little realization. When we begin to understand, it's not necessary to be angry like that. That's why we are able to stand aside and watch our own anger, our own mind becoming angry. And then anger disappears. Or feeling too depressed, too worried. Well, I'm getting worried, unnecessarily too worried. There you are watching your own mind, your own worry you're watching. And once you observe it, it's not a problem. Just as I mentioned, when you're driving along the highway, there is a place with 10 minutes delay. So you know that. That's not a problem. Maybe when you have to stop your car, you may be reading something to pass with 10 minutes. It's not a problem. But without being aware of it, if you are caught in the traffic, you become anxious. Maybe it may be 2 hours, it may be 3 hours, it may be, we don't know. So when we are aware of the fact it's only 10 minutes, it's just like becoming aware of our own mind slowly, unnecessarily becoming too anxious, too worried. So when you observe your own mind, mind becomes your friend. Mind is not an enemy. And at the highest level, a spiritual seeker, like say Tathagata is called in Buddhist tradition, when you reach that level, we can feel the whole humanity, the whole creation is one spiritual family. So this is the uniqueness of Buddha's teachings. Buddha gave a big spiritual ideal in front of us. But he built a huge edifice, a structure. But he also gave us a ladder by which we can climb the top level. So the ladder is some noble activities, then we gradually evolve to the next stage of understanding the relative impermanence of all that I normally consider to be the most precious thing in life. And once we realize the impermanent nature of what we normally mistake to be permanent, then that realization, that conviction brings a kind of spiritual common sense, wisdom. Then we become relaxed. So now we will have interaction maybe for about half an hour. So you are also free to ask questions related to yesterday's class. So, most welcome. This is the last session.
Swami, yesterday at the beginning of the afternoon, you mentioned two major tendencies in Buddhist thinking, which I assume have implications for practice. One was the recognition of changeability, the dukkha and anatma, and the other was the emphasis on sunya.
Yeah.
So these are the two main tendencies in Buddhist emphasis, and what implications do they have for practice?
Yeah. So I shall try to explain. In the Buddhist tradition, there are two religious movements. One is Mahayana, the other is Hinayana. Mindfulness, as we discussed yesterday, is based on the text called Mahasatipatthana Sutta. It is part of the Digha Nikaya, and it is also in a smaller version, shorter version. It is called Satipatthana Sutta, which is found in Majjhima Nikaya. This is part of the Hinayana tradition, what is called Theravada tradition. They teach certain disciplines. One is Vipassana. The other one is Vipassana actually means proper understanding, proper insight, proper vision, and this mindfulness is linked to that. The second principle of the Hinayana system is calmness. Calmness and tranquility comes when we realize the impermanent nature of what actually bothers us, what actually causes a lot of worry and anxiety. See, we frequently interpret the cause of our problem, the causes of our problems to be permanent. So once we realize that is a part of a changing phenomenon, then that worry goes away. The word shunya is to be understood in the context of Mahayana Buddhism. The word shunya or shunyata is the absolute reality according to Mahayana Buddhism. It's called Shunyavada, or the school of the doctrine of emptiness, the doctrine of the great void. It is a Mahayana tradition. Now, and then they also believe that it is possible for everyone to realize the Buddha nature that is present in all of us. In all of us, it is possible for us to reveal, to realize, to reconnect with our own Buddha nature, which is called Tatha Gata. Now, mindfulness in a way is natural to both these schools. In the impermanence, the consequent dissatisfaction called dukkha, and anatma, I mean the view that there is no permanent reality called atman in this empirical world, it is common to all the Buddhist philosophers, all the schools of Buddhist philosophy is used. But the highest reality, the highest goal of human spiritual endeavor according to Shunyavada is realization of the doctrine of Shunya, and also to reconnect with our own essential Buddha nature in Mahayana system. The Satipatthana Sutta, which is part of the Hinayana tradition, Theravada Buddhism, is they do not speak so much about Shunyata. They talk about these practices. They are more ascetic, more orthodox in nature, and they mostly base their doctrines on Pali canon. But Mahayana Buddhists have got a huge store of Sanskrit scriptures because it gave birth to an extensive philosophical tradition. So the impermanent nature of all these phenomenal entities is part of the mainstream Buddhist philosophy as a whole. And dukkha, the consequent conviction of the incompleteness or dissatisfaction or the limitation of these impermanent phenomena, that is also part of mainstream Buddhist tradition. It's common to all the Buddhist philosophers. I'm talking about the meditative practices of both these schools, Vipassana and Samatha in the Hinayana tradition, and Shunyata, realization of Shunyata, and Tathagata Garbha in the Mahayana tradition. In a short session, 3 lectures, we cannot give a complete picture. There is a lot of scope for, confusion, but we can always listen to this again. Maybe it's recorded.
Swamiji, good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Pranayam and Vipassana. You said.
Could you?
Pranayam.
Pranayama.
Yeah, breathing. Pranayam and Vipassana. You said it is one and same, but Hatha Yoga says.
I did not say pranayama and vipassana are the same. No. Pranayama is understood in breath control that will be practiced by those who practice mindfulness, which is again linked to vipassana.
Okay.
Yeah. Pranayama, the word as such is mostly found in the yoga tradition, Patanjali yoga tradition.
Yeah, because it connects with kumbhakas. It connects with kumbhakas, and breath is not connecting with kumbhaka. Yeah. It is simple breath. So that yesterday I wanted to ask, so today.
Yeah, you can ask the question.
Yeah, so if I'm practitioner of pranayama and I'm doing Bhastrika pranayam, inhalation, retention, exhalation, retention.
Yeah.
Will it help me to practice my vipassana or mindfulness?
Yeah. Bhastrika is a yogasana pranayama tradition in the Geranda Samhita and Hatha Yoga Pratika. They all teach about these disciplines. But kumbhaka, there is a general principle that is followed by all practitioners, both Buddhist and non-Buddhist, that kumbhaka beyond the discipline, beyond moderation, can be harmful. At the kumbhaka, when you retain the breath within, it can hyperactivate some of the nervous system, and so it can lead to flight of ideas, it can lead to delusions of grandeur. All those things can happen if it is not practiced with proper discipline, with moderation. So kumbhaka is potentially dangerous unless it is practiced with proper discipline, with proper moderation. There is an inherent problem because it activates the nervous system and it generates heat and energy. You feel a lot of enthusiasm, so you will have a tendency to overdo it, and when you overdo it, it can lead to flight of ideas, manic excitement, and this of the triple delusions called the delusions of grandeur. You may suddenly feel you are a great yogi, maybe you have a big mission for the world, or maybe you feel a lot of energy, excitement. All this can happen if one doesn't practice kumbhaka, retention, either anta kumbhaka, maybe retaining breath within, or bahi kumbhaka, retaining breath out. If you don't do it if you don't do it with proper discipline or with moderation, it can be potentially harmful. So all the great yoga teachers like Sivananda, who is the founder of the Swami Shivananda, Divine, they all used to give warning. Model commercial teachers frequently don't, but they also give warning frequently. Okay.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Swamiji, you spoke a lot about imperfection and impermanence.
Yeah.
To me, I know something is imperfect when I know what is perfect. I know something is impermanent if I know what is permanent. So my question is, what is permanent and what is perfect?
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. If you have a full conviction as to what is the right thing, what is imperfect, what is perfect, that's a great thing, no doubt about it. And if you can bring that conviction into everyday life, then that actually brings you a spiritual common sense. That brings wisdom. The problem is not lack of intellectual understanding of what is perfect and what is imperfect. The problem is always bringing that understanding into every micro moment, every minute of your action, your thought. Frequently we forget, we call pramada or apada in Pali. Of course it is used in yoga and also Buddhist tradition. We forget that forgetfulness is the greatest enemy of mindfulness. So mindfulness is nothing but getting established in the perpetual awareness of what we actually, at least many of us know intellectually. That's a big challenge. Most people know certain fundamental things. And I have sincere desire to practice. But very often when a difficult situation comes, we may not be able to remember that all the time. Buddha only asks you to remember that. That is called Smriti Upasthana, means being established in that awareness. It's called Satipatthana. That is in Pali language. So that is the whole discourse. So Buddha repeats the beginning of Mahasatipatthana. He says, Ekonayam Bhikkave Maggo, means this is the only direct path of monks, addressing Buddhist monks, he mentions. Now this can be reached through a lot of disciplines. If one can always remember and being established in the natural, spontaneous awareness of what you actually know intellectually, then we become all wise. The problem is always the conflict between intellect and mind. We all live at the mental level. And mind is not within our control. That's a problem. If we can really practice what we know to be the right thing to practice, there will be very little problem in the world. But often there is a conflict between what we actually want to do sincerely and what our mind eventually permits us to do, or what we end up doing, If we can bridge the gap, the problem is solved. So Buddha himself changed his style of preaching depending upon the type of audience he had. So Mahasatipatthana Sutta is meant for a bigger audience, the people who belong to all levels of spiritual evolution. The shorter versions in the Majjhika Nikaya, it is meant for those who are slightly more evolved, so it is shorter. So there are those who need to go from where they stand right now to the next nearest step. Okay. Power.
So you mentioned that forgetfulness is the greatest enemy of mindfulness.
Yeah.
Wouldn't ignorance be the greatest enemy of mindfulness?
Yeah, in fact that's true. Ignorance is the fundamental cause of everything. Ignorance is the fundamental cause. In fact, ignorance is the fundamental cause of the whole problem of existence, empirical existence. It is the fundamental cause of a desire for being born, for doing things, for thinking, and it is the cause of the whole physical cycle of existence. But in the context of meditation and mindfulness, lack of awareness or forgetfulness is the direct cause. I am talking about the context of mindfulness. But if you talk about Buddhist philosophy as a whole, ignorance, avidya, is the fundamental cause. That is the mother of all problems. But forgetfulness is the immediate enemy of Mindfulness. Mindfulness means being always aware of it. Forgetfulness means not being aware of it. Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, please.
So I actually don't know what Maya is. I was
Maya.
I don't really know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, Maya is an important subject in Vedanta, but I shall try to, in Advaita Vedanta especially. So, Maya is something that makes us believe that something is real, even though it is not real. So, the famous definition of Maya by Shankaracharya is Sannapya Sannapi Bhuyatmigano, Bhinnapya Bhinnapya Bhuyatmigano, Sangapya Sangapi Bhuyatmigano, Mahan Buddha Nirvachani Yeruva. Put in simple, plain English, it is beyond description, beyond definition, beyond explanation. It is neither existence nor non-existence, neither with parts nor without parts. It is difficult to understand. I shall give an example. Many of us know certain things, and that awareness doesn't help us in our life. So, according to Maya doctrine, the whole universe, human life, all days are not absolutely unreal, because we all experience the world, but not absolutely real because they don't remain the same for all time. They keep changing. So anything which is subject to changes cannot be real in the absolute sense, but it's not unreal in the absolute sense. So it is neither real nor unreal, so it is relative. Because it cannot be defined as real in the absolute sense, and cannot be defined as unreal in the absolute sense, it is neither real nor unreal. So it is beyond our empirical comprehension. But the point is, so long as you are within Maya, you don't recognize it is something, it is only relatively real, it is not absolutely real. When you come out of it, then you understand it is not absolutely real. So through spiritual practice, through proper discerning wisdom, renunciation of the unreal, and having a strong desire for spiritual liberation, spiritual enlightenment, connecting our mind with spiritual ideas, contemplating on the spiritual ideas, and internalizing these great ideas slowly, and also along with that, practicing unselfishness in our life. What happens, slowly, we will evolve to a stage where we understand, well, what I consider to be the absolute reality, which is subject to change. So you can find sadhana chatushayam and sravana, manana, nididhyasana. These are, okay, I'm just quoting the Sanskrit, some of you maybe, nitya nitya vastu vivega, ihamutra phala bhogi vidaga, shamadishka sarka sampatti mumukshutvam, sadhana chatushayam and sravana, manana, nididhyasana. 7 disciplines are elaborated by Shankaracharya in Vivekachudamani. You can read it and get a clear picture. Thank you.
Swamiji, in the Satipatthana Sutta, you're talking about having this awareness of impermanence with the feelings, the dhammas, the mind, the body. I have a couple of questions related to that. When is it proper to shift from one to another, say from body to the mind? And then how does that relate to the Vedanta idea of trying to find the absolute reality that's not changing?
So I shall come to the second part of the question. Once you get established in mindfulness, then you become convinced that the reality is something that is beyond description, definitions, which is all-pervading, which is inherent, which is immanent. That idea comes to a person, that idea naturally comes to a highly evolved person. And coming to the first part of the question, So the first discipline that Mahasatipatthana Sutta recommends is breathing. Yesterday I mentioned this. So I gave this example and I tried to explain, breathing is a tiny thread through which you can eventually control and restrain your mind. How this happens? If you listen to yesterday's lecture, I gave the example of the king and the minister. Anyway, so I won't repeat now again. So when you breathe in with full awareness that I'm inhaling and you completely become aware of it, what happens is you are not aware of anything else. And when you breathe out, so it's the first discipline. Then also you are not aware of anything else because you try to completely be aware of the fact that you are breathing out. So that actually takes your mind away from all other hindrances which are enumerated in the chapter dealing with Dhamma, which is the contents of the mind. So all greed, lust, all those worry, anxiety, all those things are, at least for the time being, not visible when you are fully aware of this breathing in, breathing out. And it changes. So naturally you become aware of, you become established in awareness, at the same time the changeability of this. And what happens is mind slowly gets emptied of all thought currents, vrittis, vasanas and samskaras. And if you do it with greater and greater concentration, then the absorption of the mind in, well, I'm breathing in, breathing out, becomes complete. So, just like a milk, if a glass of milk, if there is 10% water, then if you pour milk, the glass can absorb only 90%. If there is 50% water in the milk, if you pour milk, it can absorb only 50%. The other percent, all the water was there. If the glass is completely empty and if you pour milk, it can absorb 100% milk. So if you can completely empty our mind of all these hindrances, all these the unnecessary, the trash, so to speak, then what happens is mind becomes slowly calm and quiet. So that's maybe after breathing exercise over, the mind may come back to it. So that is very important. Discipline, it should be practiced under a teacher. Otherwise what happens, afterwards all those ideas which disappear for the time being may rush back again with greater force. The people sometimes get into trouble. That's a time when fleeting ideas or maybe delusions can come as a result of imperfect guidance. So it should be done with a lot of discipline. With food habits, we should practice certain discipline in food, drinks and disciplines. Otherwise, all this can activate some of our emotional systems, nervous systems, and that can have harmful consequences. Okay, I think we have. Yeah, please.
Swami, I missed what you were saying about overcoming anxiety and to reach calmness.
Oh, yeah. Just now, what I said just now? Oh, yeah. So once we realize that what causes anxiety, those causes, those factors are not permanent, then anxiety also cannot be a permanent experience. It's clear to you? See, people get too anxious because they may have lost money, lost job, looking for a new job, or maybe challenges, conflicts in workplace, different situations. They become too anxious, too much worried. They forget that this situation may not be there tomorrow or maybe after some months or after some years. As everything else, these problematic situations also are likely to change. Everything changes. So why should this problem remain all the time? That is frequently forgotten because we become closely identified with that anxiety. So, in fact, instead of looking at the whole phenomenon of life as one unit, we take a chunk of our experiences and identify also with that and then say, well, I am terribly unhappy. So they worry too much about it. But everything, the whole phenomenon, the whole universe, including our life experiences, are changing all the time and will change all the time. Once we remember the changeability of everything, including what causes anxiety, then anxiety will be reduced. But frequently we may know intellectually, we won't be able to bring this to that micro moment when we are feeling anxious. The art of bringing that to a state of awareness when it is always needed is mindfulness. That is being established in awareness. That's the literal meaning of it. Okay.
So, Swami, one question following up to that.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we are reading reminiscences of Sri Ramakrishna direct disciples, it talks about situations where they were anxious for others.
Yeah.
Sri Ramakrishna was anxious for Rakal's health, and mother was anxious for many others.
Yeah.
Is there a anxiousness that's the right way and the wrong?
Yeah, you're right. In fact, concern for others, anxiety, let's say mother becoming too anxious the welfare of children, or you become anxious to do something good, that anxiety doesn't have that misery element. It doesn't make you wretched and miserable, See, let us say, for example, there's an earthquake in some distant countries, continents. You read newspaper, you become too much worried. That worry, because you are a good human being, maybe you are a real Buddhist, that doesn't make you miserable or wretched. When Buddha felt so miserable, so unhappy, when he saw the dead body being taken to the cremation ground, or the sick man, or the old man, when suddenly the realities of old age and sickness and death were revealed to him, he became very unhappy. But that unhappiness is not, it is not mixed with the feeling of wretchedness. Say the way you lose money and you are a greedy person and you shed tears or you worried. That feeling of unhappiness is qualitatively different from the unhappiness of a Buddha, or the unhappiness, anxiety of a mother for her child, or maybe anxiety you feel for the safety of people suffering from distant countries in an earthquake. That's called parinama dukkha. I mentioned this earlier. Parinama means transformative. In fact, that anxiety makes you a noble person, and that anxiety is rooted in compassion. It's called compassion. That is called compassion, actually. That is what the Pali psychology called metta. In English they write metta, I don't know, M-E-T-T-A, something like that. That is kindly, friendly, compassionate feelings for others. So, the anxiety that Sri Ramakrishna had, the anxiety that great spiritual teachers had for the good of including Buddha had, that anxiety doesn't make them miserable. That doesn't give you a feeling of being wretched. No. Rather, that anxiety is a mark of nobility, higher spiritual evolution. In fact, that's what makes many people truly great. That natural to all great spiritual persons. Their spiritual persons can never be insensitive. When they become sensitive in this manner. That sensitivity is accompanied by compassion, anxiety for good of others. So we shall conclude, and thank you for attending the retreat and also the wonderful questions to everyone. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.